Hi, welcome to the bathtub. It's the old masturbator, the Scott Bradfield. We're kind of experimenting today. This is we've got a new friend, a new member of the International Bathing Alliance. If you look way behind me here, you'll see Dodo. Hello, Dodo. Dodo is a so and so. We're trying to teach you how to say Dodo is a so and so. And this is Lucky, who jumped on my lap when I started trying to tape these. We're having a little technical issue here, which is that Dodo, for some reason, when I talk, he or she, we haven't figured that out yet, just chirps away. And so I don't think you can hear it, though. I taped one of these and I couldn't really hear. If you hear a little tiny chirping in the background, it drives you crazy. I'll probably do something about it in the future. But I'm going to try one whole thing with her, even if she's chirping, and just do it. I've sort of co-opted my own show here. So the show is basically about me wittering on aimlessly about other people's books. And because I've become basically self-publishing, I've become a self-publishing empire. And my new book is the Millennial's Guide to Death. This is the first time I've published an entirely new collection of stories by myself. Though I did do Dazzle. I did the Dazzle stories. A few Dazzle Resplendent. Oh, try not lucky on her ass. I did this a few years ago, which is just the Dazzle stories I've published over 20 or 30 years. And this is my first new collection I self-published. And I'll be doing a lot of self-publishing over the next few years. I'm really sorry. I know it's a pain in the ass, but I don't want to co-opt the show too much. But I don't have anyone else to do it for me. And I'm going to die someday. So I want to get all these books. I want to give them all their own. Put them out, send them off into the world, and hopefully they'll be happy. So today, I think this will be my last reading from this collection. I'm enjoying doing them. And I was doing them just as audio only. I may do this as audio only, or I may... I get dog hair all over me from Lucky. Lucky sheds hair everywhere. She's lying down now. So I may turn this into an audio-only video. If I can keep a video going, I'll do that so you can see Dodo. Today I wanted to read a story called Zombie-ish, which I've tried to read a couple times now, and I keep losing it. And the story behind Zombie-ish is kind of only interesting to me. When I lived in London for many decades and loved it there. I don't think I'll live there again. But one of the many people I would run into occasionally and knew over the decades was a guy named Stephen Jones. He's a big editor in the horror field, very nice guy, very smart guy, really knows the field of horror. One of the first people who told me that Clark Ashton Smith was worth reading, and I didn't believe him. And I ended up reading. I loved Clark Ashton Smith, and Stephen reprinted a story of mine once, and he published this. Actually, he published the title story of this collection, and I would run into Stephen every 2 or 3 years, like clockwork. I would run into him at a bar or at some party, or I don't really get out very much, but I'd run into Stephen, and we'd talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and it was nice. But most of the time I saw him for about a decade. Every time I saw him, he would say, "By the way, I'm editing original stories about zombies, and if you write a zombie story, send it to me." And I thought, I'm never going to write a zombie story. I have no interest in writing zombie stories. I can't think of a story that is less interesting to me, especially when everyone was you keep doing zombie stories. And I thought it's one of those things like vampires you thought was going to die. It never did. So it was always in the back of my mind. And I had a friend who was always publishing. He published a story for it every year. It was he would write a story for Stephen every year. He was a good writer, and he would be in there every year. And I kept thinking, well, nobody's interested in my stuff. Maybe I will write one. And I fiddled with the idea for years. And then I finally found one idea that I liked, which was, I liked the idea that, it was just like the zombie apocalypse was just kind of another pain in the ass event. This was written before the coronavirus pandemic, but like that, something where, the end of the heat death of our planet, and the Republican and Donald Trump becoming president, and, all these horrible things that happen every few years in our lives. And I thought, well, maybe it's just another pain in the ass. That was the joke of the story. And I set the story in my brother Jason's old it was the only place I'd been to in LA for a long time, which is in the Fairfax district. He had a condo out there. Say goodbye to Lucky. Okay, this is called Zombie-ish with a much too long introduction. Marilyn Jansen hated Fridays. There were always too many people moving up and down the thinly carpeted corridors of her co-op on Fairfax Boulevard, knocking on doors, dragging their tools, and pushing their trolleys, and it was impossible to tell the normal residents apart from stray Airbnbers, mail-order delivery people, and the regular circulation of building contractors, plumbers, and electricians. Every time a window slammed or a power drill revved, Marilyn's heart jumped. Fridays were supposed to be her study-at-home days, but she never did much studying. Instead, she sat at the balcony window and surveyed the streets below, browsing absently through her thickly bound textbook, Media Relations, Communications, or Spin, 5th edition. She found it impossible to focus on the world inside her apartment, not even her own thoughts. It all seemed fragile and unconvincing. Outside was where real life happened, clamorous, self-determined, and motivated by secret forces that were never properly explained by the 6 o'clock news. Then, one Friday morning, as if signaling the delivery of a parcel, the front doorknob rattled. Low, muffled voices reverberated in the corridor, and large, clumsy shapes thudded dimly against one another like whispering kids lining up to ring the doorbell at Halloween. "Hello," Marilyn said. Something pressed against the door like an exertion of physics. "Can I please come in?" A woman's voice, rough and moist. "I'm really thirsty. Do you have a telephone? Can I make a phone call?" Sick people rarely made it this far into the building, but Marilyn tried not to sound surprised. "Go away, please," Marilyn said softly. She switched off the television with the remote. "I've called Guard Squad. You have 2 minutes, tops." Guard Squad surveillance consisted of urgently lettered intruder watch phone numbers taped above the elevator call buttons on each floor. Marilyn couldn't remember the last time she'd seen an actual guard. "I need a bathroom," the woman said. "I'm thirsty. I don't have anyone with me. I've had my shots. We need to use the phone." Heavy footsteps clomped randomly in a small circle like shoes coming to a stop in the revolving drum of a dryer. Marilyn went to the open-plan kitchen. The knife drawer was empty. The knives in the dishwasher were soiled with last night's roast beef and gravy. She couldn't bear the idea of using a dirty knife on anybody, not even a sick person. Outside, the woman's voice changed. "Please let us in. We aren't like the others. We're just thirsty. It isn't fair. You have this nice apartment, and we're only asking for a glass of water. Think about your own children. Would you want somebody to treat them this way?" Marilyn considered rinsing off the chopping knife, but was afraid to turn on the tap. The sound of rushing water might direct more attention to her side of the door. Finally, she took a large, freshly dishwashed frying pan from the stove. It felt heavy and permanent, just the way Marilyn wanted it to feel. They were trying the doorknob more forcefully now. Their whispering agreed about something. Their thirst, their needs, their momentary eruption into Marilyn's world. It was always the same. Sick people thought about nobody but themselves. "Guard Squad's on the way," Marilyn shouted. She couldn't prevent her voice from sounding loud and urgent. "You better leave." The rattling doorknob subsided. The bodies stopped moving. Then, down the long hallway, the elevator pinged. And suddenly, like a crack of thunder, the unseen bodies went shuffling and thudding in a mad scramble towards the only thing that made sense to them anymore. Later that night, when Matt got home, Marilyn was boiling water for instant chicken-flavored ramen noodles on the stove. "Why's Mrs. Watanabe all over the elevator? And who's the other one? Is that Mr. Watanabe?" Marilyn had been trying to interpret the minuscule, multilingual cooking instructions on the back of the crinkly green package. Didn't anybody write in English anymore? Everything seemed to be written in Arabic, Serbo-Croatian, Swedish, or Chinese. "I don't know, honey, and I don't want to know. Did you pick up bottled water like I asked?" "Forgot." Mac double-bolted the door and latched the latch. "But I'm meeting the guys for a drink later. I can swing by Target on the way home." After Mac left for the second time that day, Marilyn rebolted the front door and stood listening for more sounds from the hallway. Occasionally, a door opened or closed. The elevator pinged, or individuals strolled past, speaking into their cells. "No, I'll take a cab. Everything's fine. Don't worry. That was Mrs. Watanabe. She was like 100 years old." At one point, Marilyn thought she heard gunfire from the basement garage, but it turned out only to be a gangster film playing on a neighbor's home cinema system. She didn't know what to do with herself. It felt like being left in cold storage. She channel surfed, checked out the medicine cabinet, and every few minutes or so gravitated back towards the front door where she resumed listening. Eventually, the only distinct voices she could hear were coming from the street, so she took her glass of Chardonnay out to the concrete balcony and gazed down at the illuminated traffic. You could identify sick people from far away. They comprised weird diversities, like gang member extras in a 70s-era made-for-TV movie. In the lead shuffled an elderly black woman in a sun hat, followed by a skinny white barefoot man in a cheap grayish suit, a Mexican boy wearing a plastic red fire hat, and a teenage Asian boy with a crew cut and a large hairy mole on his cheek. You never saw demographics like this wandering the streets in a healthy neighborhood, Marilyn thought. It wouldn't make sense. A few yards from Marilyn's balcony, they staggered to a stop and looked at her. "Do you have anything to drink?" the elderly black woman asked. "We're so thirsty. Are there any stores around here? Could you give us some water?" The Mexican boy was chewing on something black and oblong that resembled one of those deep-fried turkey legs sold at a county fair. Across the street, an elderly white woman in a pink velour tracksuit was walking her manicured white poodle on a jeweled pink leash. The poodle started to bark. "That lady's got a dog," Marilyn told the black woman. "Why don't you run along?" "We're not looking for trouble," the skinny man said. He seemed to be addressing the dog. "Can we come inside? I need to call my wife. The last time I saw her, she didn't look very well." "Hey," it was the old lady across the street. "I'll sick Lucy on you. Now get." The little boy in the red fire hat looked up from his turkey leg. His mouth was stained by something red and coagulant that resembled barbecue sauce. "I don't like dogs," the little boy said. At Target, still buzzing from beer and bourbon chasers, Mac pushed his large plastic shopping cart down the aisles of gloaming merchandise. He loved Target after midnight. Everything you could think of buying was available at half the cost of anywhere else. "Could you help me open this?" the woman said softly, emerging from the cosmetics aisle with a neon yellow bottle of Lucozade. She wore dirty Lycra bicycle pants and a baggy, multiply stained Sonics t-shirt. "I have a fever and I can't find my way home." Her teeth and lips were sticky with a brown, purplish substance. Max struck her firmly in the belly with the front of his shopping cart, and she staggered backwards. "Get," he said. She took 3 slow, gliding steps backwards, 1, 2, 3, as if counting them in her head. She seemed amazed by Mac's presence. He liked that look on the face of a person he didn't know. "Don't make me angry," she whispered abstractly. She seemed confused by dimensions and distances. "When I'm angry, I'm not very nice." Who is? Mac thought. One of the blue uniformed security guards trotted over from the front door, carrying a short-stock shotgun with simulated wood-grain furnish. His unholstered walkie-talkie crackled. "You're in a lot of trouble, lady," Max said. "Now get out of here while you can." She showed him her teeth. They were cracked and stumpy, as if she'd been chewing rocks. "I just need a little help with this bottle. I have friends outside. Everybody's so thirsty. We need a sip of Lucozade and we'll be okay." The guard waved the shotgun as if it were a lost jacket someone had left behind the counter. "Hey!" the guard shouted. "You aren't welcome here." Other customers appeared at the mouths of aisles, or at least they looked like customers. Mac was never sure about anybody after a few bourbon chasers. The lady reached out for Mac. Her fingernails were broken with little flecks of rose-pink nail polish. "It's too late now, lady," Max said. "You had your chance." Then he pulled back his shopping cart like the spring of a slingshot and gave it to her one more time. "I don't see the point in moving to Colorado, Mom," Marilyn was saying on the phone when Mac came back to the front door with 2 large Target carry bags. "They have sick people in Colorado, too. They just don't talk about them on the national news. I don't know why, Mom. Maybe it's because nobody's interested in Colorado. But if something goes wrong in California, it's a big deal. Of course I'm safe. Mac's here. We've got guard squad. Everything will be fine. At least that's what they keep saying in the newspaper." Marilyn and her mom, Mac thought. They drive each other crazy, but they can't stand to be out of contact for more than a few hours. He left the bags of bottled water on the kitchen counter, removed his shoes, and examined his wavy reflection in the burnished metallic gray surface of the refrigerator freezer. It felt like witnessing the secret emergence of somebody he used to be. "It's like everything else, Mom," Marilyn said. "Earthquakes, tornadoes, terrorists at travel resorts, and what about all this global warming they keep talking about? The world isn't a safe place. We have to accept that. Now, I've really got to go, Mom. Mac's home, and I haven't seen him all day. Give Dad my love, and when you get a chance, come visit us real soon." By the time Marilyn showered and got into bed, Mac was rolled over on his side facing the window. Outside, cars raced their engines. Occasionally, there was a loud screech of tires and a low, hard thump, like the sound of a tennis racket striking a feather pillow. "Kids in their cars," Max said. Marilyn sat up in the darkness and looked at the open window. "If they're so harmless," she said finally, "what about Mrs. Watanabe?" Outside, male voices hooted and laughed. Mrs. Watanabe could hardly carry her cane to the elevator. Anybody could dismember an old bat like Mrs. Watanabe. Marilyn thought about this for a while. What about when we get too weak to carry our canes to the elevator? Or what if one of us gets the flu? What if they get stronger, or remember how to use weapons, or operate machinery? We can't be complacent. What if someday there's more of them than there are of us? It was Mac's turn to think for a while. Outside, the voices diminished, and traffic subsided to a low, susurrant hum. Finally, Mac said, "Look, babe, we've had our shots, and we're taking the supplements. These things are like waves. Eventually they go away, and the next wave comes along. Like that monsoon in Thailand a few years ago, or that nuclear reactor breaking down in Japan." The next morning, Marilyn drove to her part-time job at the Buzzy Bee Daycare Center on 7th Avenue. In the tanbark-strewn playground, several of the older children were huddled in a circle. "One got in the yard," Sarah, the assistant manager, said. "Steve and Johnny hit it with a wiffle bat, and it went down like a wet bag of laundry." Marilyn could hardly see them through the smudged, mesh-layered window. "Are you sure they should be playing with it?" Sarah shrugged. "It's good for them. It empowers them to accept the reality of social illness or something like that. Anyway, if they haven't had their shots, that's not our responsibility. It says so in the parent-teacher contract." At the first co-op residents meeting of the spring, an LAPD patrolman named Officer Ramirez presented a talk on public health and safety. "You gotta remember," he said, leaning one elbow against the wooden podium, "that these characters haven't got any upper body strength, no muscle density. They're like cardboard cutouts of people with basic autonomic functions. Light, hunger, heat, maybe some minimal hearing. All they understand is eat and drink, eat and drink. They're like those battery-powered robots that run in circles until they lose power, then they plug themselves into a power source, recharge, and run in circles again. They're self-sustaining biological programs that look like people and talk like people, but they'll never actually be people ever again." Margaret didn't recognize many of her fellow residents at the meeting. There was Mrs. Buckland, who sat behind the podium with her husband, wearing a lapel card that told everybody she was co-op director, as if anyone else wanted the job. There was a 50-ish black couple that lived across the hall, and finally an old Japanese-looking man with a wooden cane and a hearing aid who, Marilyn decided, was probably Mr. Watanabe. "If they're so helpless," said a bulky, well-exercised man in cargo pants and a Gold's Gym t-shirt, "what about my Range Rover? Or that antenna they tore off Sue's car in the basement?" Everybody nodded somberly, as if agreeing with some vaguely worded axiom in church, such as "do unto others" or "turn the other cheek." Officer Ramirez shrugged. His various attachments, gun, mace canister, billy club, and walkie-talkie, rattled like a set of clumsy wind chimes. "How can I put it? Bad things happen, but if there's only 2 or 3 of them, and you're in reasonably good health, you should be okay. And as for that car antenna, these characters will chew through anything that gets in their way. Just make sure it isn't you." It got to the point where Marilyn couldn't focus on anything but sick people. When she was driving down the street, she only noticed human figures that shambled or lurched or lay face down on the pavement, quivering like stroke victims. When she was teaching or being taught, she routinely kept one eye on the primary exit, and at home she habitually sat facing her front door, like a bouncer guarding the entrance to her own life. She didn't even know what she was waiting for anymore. She only hoped it would get here soon. Every knock on the door felt significant, like a phone call from an almost forgotten relative. "Good afternoon, ma'am. We're with the Church of Latter-day Saints. Could we please come in? We can't talk very easily through this door." "We don't open our door to strangers," she said. It was a point of pride. "Why don't you go back to Utah where you came from?" "We're from South Alameda, ma'am. Could we please come inside? You seem to have some misconceptions about our faith." Faith was one of those words that always made Marilyn anxious, like race or underarms. "I don't have any misconceptions. I just want to be left alone." The voices conferred. It made Marilyn recall the way sick people banged against one another when moving through a small corridor. "We don't all marry lots of women, ma'am, or perform blood atonement ceremonies in our backyards. We're just normal Americans who believe in God. We want to help you understand who we are so you don't go around suffering misconceptions that make the world more confusing than it already is." But that was one thing Marilyn definitely didn't want. She didn't want to understand the world. She didn't want the world to understand her. She just wanted to live her life without the world getting in her way. She just wanted to be left alone. Then, just as the sickness had arrived in Marilyn's world, it went away again. The awkward bands of shuffling and mismanaged pedestrians disappeared from streets and parking lots. The local evening news went back to running stories about office fires and gas refinery explosions, and even Marilyn's HMO stopped sending her discount coupons for booster inoculations and sickness prevention clinics. Now, when Marilyn's mother called, the subject of sick people didn't even come up. They spent all their time talking about the latest shooting incidents in preschools and movie theaters, El Nino, tornadoes in the Midwest, and the Republican and Democratic national conventions. "I just don't understand anything anymore," Marilyn's mother said, her voice partially drowned out by a revving juicer. "All I know is that you better take care of yourself in this world, honey, because nobody's going to take care of you. It's not the world I was born into, but it's definitely the world I'm going to die in, whether I like it or not." Sometimes there was a brief, retrospective documentary on PBS in which relatives of sick people spoke about the random brutalities they had witnessed. It was like watching something horrible through the wrong end of a telescope, recalled a middle-aged woman with a scar running slantwise across her right eyebrow. It was like none of these things were happening to me. Some of the sick people used to attend the same PTA meetings I did. One of them babysat my kids. Then, all of a sudden, they turned into people I couldn't talk to. They kept coming at me, without any sense of anger or remission, like they were half asleep. They wanted something from me that I couldn't give them. I was just somebody who got in their way. Later that night, after Mac went to bed, Marilyn filled a Tupperware bowl with the remaining lasagna and left it outside Mr. Watanabe's front door. It felt like delivering a secret message to the world that nobody would ever read except her. That's zombie-ish. I just realized, I don't know if the bird is chirping all through that, but the end of the story about Stephen Jones was I spent years, 10 years or something, finally writing a story about a zombie, and I sent it to Steve. He said, I don't edit those anymore. He edited this anthology for like 10 years, and then by the time he quit, I finished it. And I sat on the story for like 5 years. Nobody wanted to publish it. And eventually, it was published in this lovely magazine, St. Joshi edited for the Great Centipede Press, which is called Weird Fiction Review. Anyway, I was glad to see that story published in a place I loved. I like to look at anyway. It's a lovely looking magazine. Okay, happy bathing. This is probably my last one for a while. I hope the bird chirping isn't too annoying when this is finally taped, and we'll see you soon.